and extends congratulations on your election to preside over the sittings of the 78th session of the General Assembly. Ghana will also use this, the greatest of all platforms, to express the deep condolence and sympathies of our people and government to the peoples and governments of Morocco and Libya over the recent tragic events that have engulfed their countries. I do not need to employ any hyperbole, nor find any fancy words to state the reality of the situation humanity currently faces. Our world is not a happy place today. Wherever we look, and in whichever area of our lives to which we turn our attention, there is unhappiness, distrust, and loss of confidence in the structures that have guided the governance of the world since the end of the Second World War, nearly 8 decades ago. Mr. President, the theme chosen for this meeting is rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. The choice of the theme implies that there's general acknowledgement that things are not what they ought to be in our world. The mutual trust among nations that is required to ensure harmony has considerably diminished. The cohesion that we need to build the peace and prosperity of our societies is disintegrating and nearing Cold War lows. We do not seem to have any common values on which we can all agree, nor common goals to which we all aspire. The fault lines are not just between poor and rich, or the South and North, or the developed and developing countries. Even within well-established and rich countries, the tensions over trade, climate, political boundaries, and geopolitical spheres of influence are palpable. Long-held definitions are being challenged, and sacred truths and beliefs are being questioned or discarded outright. And in some instances, the deliberate peddling of blatant untruths has become acceptable. This organization, the United Nations, under whose auspices we, the nations of the world, are gathered for the annual review of the world, was established in the belief that our common humanity would be the overriding consideration in dealing with the problems that would invariably arise when we deal with one another. There is no doubt that the organization has achieved a great deal in its 78 years of existence, of which we can all be justifiably proud. But it is also true that the reluctance by the nations that were the major powers at the formation of the organization to agree to any reform to reflect present realities has led to the undermining of the credibility of the United Nations and some of its organs, in particular, the Security Council. Ghana is currently serving out the second of its 2-year term on the Security Council as a non-permanent member. This is the 4th time in the 66 years since we joined the UN, the first post-colonial African nation to do so, that we've had the privilege of serving on the Council. Mr. President, it has been a sad and disappointing experience for us. We've witnessed it firsthand, over and over again, that the big powers of the United Nations might be preaching democracy, fairness, and justice around the world, but are happy to practice the opposite here at the United Nations, prioritizing parochial interests over those of humanity. Back in 2017, the first time I addressed the General Assembly as President of my country, I spoke at length on the need to reform of the United Nations and of the Security Council in particular. I said then that the urgent need to reform this organization had been talked about and scheduled for a long time. But somehow, we've never found the courage and the will to execute it. I said then that Ghana supports UN reform, especially of the Security Council, as set out in Africa's common position on UN reform, based on the Eswatini Consensus. Mr. President, I said then that the time was long overdue to correct the long-standing injustice that the current structure and composition of the United Nations Security Council represent for the nations of Africa. After serving on the Council at this difficult time in the world, our views on the need for reform have been even more strongly reasserted. We cannot continue to preach democracy, equality, and good governance around the globe. We cannot insist on peace and justice in the world when our global organization is seen by the majority of its members and the people of the world as hampered by an unjust and unfair structure. Mr. President, the Assembly has quite properly chosen the rebuilding of trust as critical in restoring stability and prosperity to our world. We cannot rebuild that trust when the organization that should bind us is seen by many as helping to perpetuate an unfair world order, which is reinforced by an inequitable, dysfunctional global financial architecture. Mr. President, for the past year and a half, a full-scale war is being waged in the center of Europe. The United Nations appears unwilling or unable to influence the events taking place in Ukraine. Ghana has sat on the Security Council throughout this period and can testify that the global solidarity we seek to reignite under the umbrella of the UN will only happen if and when it suits those who wield the mighty power of veto. And at the moment, there's nothing to show that these countries have any interest or inclination to do so. Ghana still believes that this organization provides the best vehicle for the world to manage its hydra-headed problems, but it can only function effectively and meet our expectations when we reform the pillars upon which it rests. Anything short of that will continue to undermine its credibility. Mr. President, I do not refer to the events in Ukraine and seek to pretend to ignore the tragic events in my own neighborhood of West Africa and the Sahel. Instability in the Sahel and widespread terroristic activities have put West African countries under severe political pressure and economic strain. Several countries in the region have lost vast stretches of territory to the rampaging terrorists. Coup d'etats have reemerged as what some mistakenly hope would be the solution to the threats that confront their nations. We in the West African region are trying as best as we can, under the very trying conditions we face, to deal with the situation. We are convinced that the conflicts that continue to plague our continent and our region, in particular, would be more satisfactorily resolved if the international community was to support, not undermine, the efforts of our regional and continental organizations to deal with them. Africans fought and died in the Second World War in defense of Europe and her allies, who reset the world towards the path of peace and prosperity that their nations and citizens have enjoyed for decades now. It is surely time for the world to reciprocate in our time of need. Mr. President, we in Ghana are holding firm to our belief in democracy as the best route to build the prosperous nation that is our aim. It is true that the economic dividends that many of our citizens justifiably expect from the democratic process have not come as fast as had been anticipated. But we're determined to hold fast to the course because we believe that ultimately it will succeed in delivering freedom and prosperity for the mass of our people. We're also having to countenance for the first time in recent human history, not just the questioning of democracy and a deliberate campaign of disinformation against democracy, but also the propagation of authoritarian rule as the faster route to economic advancement. The belief of young people in democracy as the governance model best suited to build peace and prosperity in our society is under systematic attack. The economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of the war in Ukraine have only added to the pressure and the anxiety of our young people. We can also certainly do without having to spend the huge amounts of money we currently spend on security at our northern borders in particular. At this time, unhappily, we feel no sense of the international solidarity that we believe we should receive. It is surely in the interest of the whole world that West Africa should be peaceful and prosperous. We want our young people to be part of a peaceful and prosperous West Africa, rather than part of the thousands that arrive at an unwelcoming Europe after perilous journeys across the Sahara and the Mediterranean Sea. Mr. President, we do not seek to shirk any responsibility for the problems we face that are of our own making. And it bears repeating that we are not craving for sympathy, and we do not want to be a scar on anybody's conscience. But we cannot, and the world should not pretend that the present-day economic and social conditions of Africa have nothing to do with the historical injustices that have fashioned the structures of the world. It is time to acknowledge openly that much of Europe and the United States have been built from the vast wealth harvested from the sweat, tears, blood, and horrors of the transatlantic slave trade and the centuries of colonial exploitation. Maybe we should also admit that it cannot be easy to build confident and prosperous societies from nations that for centuries have their natural resources looted and their peoples traded as commodities. For centuries, the world has been unwilling and unable to confront the realities of the consequences of the slave trade. But gradually, this is changing, and it is time to bring the subject of reparations firmly to the fore. Granted, the current generations are not the ones that engaged in the slave trade, but that grand inhuman enterprise was state-sponsored and deliberate, and its benefits are clearly interwoven with the present-day economic architecture of the nations that designed and executed it. Reparations must be paid for the slave trade. No amount of money will ever make up for the horrors, but it would make the point that evil was perpetrated, that millions of productive Africans were snatched from the embrace of our continent and put to work in the Americas and the Caribbean without compensation for their labor. If there are any hesitations in some minds about the paying of reparations, it is worth considering the fact that when slavery was abolished, the slave owners were compensated for the loss of the slaves because the human beings were labeled as property, deemed to be commodities. Surely, this is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. The African Union has authorized Ghana to hold a global conference on the issue in November in Accra. It is probably also the time to return to that vexed subject of illicit financial outflows out of the continent of Africa. I refer to the report of the panel chaired by the highly respected former South African President Thabo Mbeki on the illicit flow of funds from Africa, which states that Africa is losing annually more than 88 billion United States dollars through illicit financial outflows. Yes, those monies too must be returned to the continent. It is difficult to understand why the recipient countries are comfortable about retaining such funds and are happy to call those countries from whom the monies are taken as corrupt. I believe that a joint task force of the African Union Commission and the OECD Secretariat, under the auspices of the United Nations, should be charged to find ways of stopping the damaging outflows. Mr. President, before the pandemic, we, like many other parts of the world, were making progress with the 17 SDGs, and we had good reason to believe we will achieve the 2030 target. Today, the picture we have on our performance is not very bright. Most of the 21 targets designated for achievement by 2020 have not been met, and we are not on track to achieve many other targets by 2030. According to the 2023 SDG report, just 12% of the SDG targets are on track to be achieved. Progress on 50% of the targets is weak. The most disappointing part is that we have stalled or retrogressed more than 30% of the targets. We need to accelerate action on the entire project. Mr. President, it is within our capacity to turn things round. A good start would be to make the needed changes to the structures of our organization. Then we can rebuild trust and reignite global solidarity. Mr. President, I thank you for your attention.
Coming through from New York, where President Akufo-Addo has just delivered his address at the ongoing 78th United Nations General Assembly, touching on a number of issues and for the very first time admitting that democracy has not yielded the dividends that many African countries are on the lookout for. It's a good time to bring in Dr. Ishmael Novo, who's the head of advocacy and also research fellow for the Afro Global Research Center. Thank you, sir, for spending some time with us. And I'm sure that you've been listening to the president a number of concerns about slave trade, about reparations, and what may happen in the coming days. Also talking about the nation's commitment towards the United Nations SDGs 2030. Let's start off with the, admission, first of all, from the president that when it comes to democracy, the resultant effect on the West Africa sub-region particularly hasn't been fruitful. You agree with him?
Yeah, good afternoon to your viewers and good afternoon to yourself. I think the president was spot on when he said that democracy within the sub-region in Africa has not yielded the dividend. Because one of the reasons why we clamor for democracy is not only to have the freedom to choose leaders, but to choose leaders that who are capable of turning around our economic fortunes. But over the last 3 decades or so of democratic practice in most African nations, you observe that few elites have gotten themselves rich, while the general population is lavish in poverty. So yes, he was spot on by saying that yes, the dividend of democracy, particularly in terms of getting people economically empowered, has not been that good in the sub-region. And that's why we are having all manner of challenges to democratic rule. Because once democracy doesn't deliver on economic benefit, then you create room for people to question the political establishment. So yes, he was spot on when he made that comment.
But the concern for those looking at it from the other side is that the president was basically silent on the aspect about leadership. The fact that part of the challenge comes from the political class. You have in many neighboring West African countries, their political leaders holding on to power beyond a 2-term mandate. And that's in spite of the same laws, frameworks that they have limiting those terms.
Yeah, yes, of course, you may make that argument. But then let's look at it the other way, that even in countries where we have regularly changed government, has the economic situation of the citizen improved considerably? The answer is no. Of course, the leadership, the political class, democracies as a system of government is run by people. And it is how people operationalize democracy that will give meaning to it. And over the last 3 decades, we have seen a situation where either the leaders don't understand the virtues of democracy, the values of democracy. Therefore, all that is at stake is about elections, winning elections, and going on carrying out policies that sometimes are questionable. So yes, we may argue that yes, he has deliberately not spoken about the role of leadership, leadership in terms of undermining democracy, in terms of their own activities to undermine the democratic system that are expected to sustain their rule. But again, if we even look at those of us who have changed government regularly, yes, we may be a little bit better off, but still, we have a long way to go. If you look at the fact that we still have a number of people in abject poverty, you still have people who go to bed without food, you still have communities without water. And even the way we run democracy, if you look at the fight against galamsey, it's obvious that the democratic enterprise and the way people assume power and think that power should be used is also a problem for fighting galamsey. So you have a situation where money is virtually used to run the democratic enterprise. Therefore, those who have money have their way. And therefore, you argue that, yes, to a point, he's ignoring the fact that some leaders have taken actions that have led to military coups and other things. But then again, all these other countries where elections have become more institutionalized and regular, where we even have the chance to change government, the economic situation is still what it is. It has not significantly improved. What we are seeing is that since the pandemic, things are...
Yeah, I see. And now, in his diagnosis of the problem, the president is linking all of this to slave trade and the history of the global financial architecture. What is the, issue about colonialism and our past got to do with where we find ourselves now economically? Some say that if you are indeed in control or in charge of your affairs now, then you should be in control of your economic destiny.
Yeah, that is true. But then we must also recognize that as independent states, we have been around for less than 100 years. And the road to development can be quite challenging. But then you must look at it from this angle. Has not significantly changed. That most of our economic systems have been modeled in a way that allow the transfer of resources to the advanced nations. So while we may complain about colonialism, we may complain about the slave trade and the effect it have on Africa, you must also look at, have we done anything significant to change the structure of the economies? We are still raw material based. We still export a lot of raw materials. And during the colonial era, we were not actually in charge of some of the deals that we signed. But currently we are in charge. And as we are in charge, it seems like we have not even altered the existing pattern. So we continue to sign deals that virtually mortgage our resources to the Western or the superpower. So while during slave trade, we may make the argument that we were not in charge and therefore a lot of things went wrong. Currently, we are in charge, but then we are seeing the same pattern of signing deals that virtually give the investor a lot of weight over what happens and how resources are exploited. So yes, on one breath, it is necessary to raise the argument of slave trade and trying to get reparation for Africa. But on the other hand, it is also more important to look at what we are currently doing. Are the deals we are signing in terms of natural resource exploration favorable to us? Are those deals actually inuring to our benefit? Our resources still being exploited at to our disadvantage? And of course, the answer to most of this is yes, because we look at a situation where minerals are located in your own background, and then you have 10% stake, and then the investor have almost 90%. Now, then you begin to ask, what exactly is the issue? Can't we put resources, companies, joint ventures together across the West African sub-region to exploit some of these resources? We are not doing those kind of things. We are all interested in what we call foreign direct investment. As we pursue those, and one of the things that investors are doing is to simply play us against one another. So for instance, if you're to another country that due to the need to attract foreign direct investment, have a more favorable regime, which virtually the favorable here is interpreted to mean the more the investors will get. So we tend to focus focus more on foreign direct investment, and we are paying less emphasis supported by their own government to become global giants. So if you cannot provide a system that allows your own citizens to rise up to become global champions, indeed you continue to be at the mercy of the powers that be, because you need to grow your own economy, you need to raise up who virtually become international. If you look at other countries, what they have done with state power, the state has been an essential part of the development process. And along the line, we lose control when we decide to implement the structural adjustment programs, where virtually we think that the state is not part of the development process, and we follow whatever the Western liberal theories to Therefore, they was completely withdrawn from every sector of the economy. But if you look at development history across the world, the state has been
and Prof, I thought you would have been wrapping up on this point about, the debate that the president is talking about, having some repatriations paid to the African continent. Let me get your final thoughts on that. Should we be paid as an African country, or the other countries across the continent? Should we be receiving payments now because of the past history relating to issues of slavery and colonialism? Okay, it appears we've lost Dr. Ishmael over there, but certainly point well made about the comments made by the president a couple of hours ago. We'll keep focusing on some of the fallouts of the 78th United Nations General Assembly and bring you updates. But this afternoon as well, there are some more revelations that we're getting in this special prosecutor's court documents on the former Sanitation Minister Cecilia Abena-Dapaah, as the OSP is now shining some spotlight on the husband of the former minister. The special prosecutor says that there was no evidence to support these claims by the husband of the former minister that $200,000 was discovered in the house of Cecilia Abena-Dapaah, which belonged to the niece of this minister, who's now, as we're being told by the accounts, living abroad. Now, according to the OSP, the said niece could not prove the source of this fund or provide any form of evidence of lawful remittance as being indicated by the minister. That's according to the OSP. So let's get more from Kweku Asante, who has been, going through this document, quite a voluminous one, and each day new revelations, shocking details. We are not saying, and I keep stressing that point, that the OSP's account is fully factual. But that's what its investigations is pointing out.
Yes, Blessed. In fact, if you look at the elements of these allegations that are made in the court filings of the special prosecutor, it says that the husband of Madam Cecilia Dapaah, that is Mr. Akufo, in his caution statement to the OSP, attributed ownership of the sum of $200,000 by the OSP, in which the respondents claim they erroneously reckoned as allegedly stolen from the said resident, to his niece, one Equia Dorcas Oredua, living in the United States of America. Mr. Akufo had claimed, telling the OSP, that his niece is in the habit of remitting money to him from the United States for the purposes of a construction project in respect of which he acts as consultant. However, the identified niece was unable to provide evidence of the source of the said amounts and evidence of lawful remittance of the said sums.
So let's break that down for our viewers. This is the former minister's spouse making the point that, look, the $200,000 supposedly was sent from abroad.
Yes.
Basically.
So there were $200,000, part of which were found in the house.
Yes.
And Mr. Akufo is making the point that this belonged to my niece, who is in the United States of America.
Who's sending money to us.
Who is sending money to us for some building project we are doing on her behalf. So the OSP goes and find this niece of Cecilia Dapaah's husband and try to track whether or not there is evidence of that person having been sending money to Mr. Akufo. Mind you, if in the United States and you are sending money, the paper trail, are you doing by any of these internationally known remittance agents?
Platform.
And so there is no trace of that. Plus, the other point that is being made is that the niece claimed that she brought the money personally. That's in she carried physical cash and brought it to the country. The special prosecutor is asking, if you're even going to do so, you need authorization to be able to carry such huge amounts of on you.
Because
and so
you see that
is
inscription all the time, that if you're traveling with cash on you above $100,000,
yes,
then you'd have
you need to declare it.
Yes.
And the sticking point of all this is that you recall these persons that are said to have stolen money from Madam Cecilia Dapaah, $100,000.
Yes.
$1 million. $200,000 is said in the police document to belong to Mr. Osei-Kuffour. It appears that $200,000 is not lost, actually. And so they claim in that police document in court that the house helps of Cecilia Dapaah is stealing that money.
As we know before, that was
not true according to the OSP, because that $200,000 was discovered when the OSP officers went to Madam Cecilia Dapaah's house to search. It was then that Madam Kuffour, Mr. Kuffour, who is Cecilia Dapaah's husband, claimed that this amount of money actually belongs to the niece abroad. The OSP is making the point that even after the discovery of this money, Cecilia Dapaah and the husband has still not gone to the police to change their earlier story that $200,000 as part of the larger $1 million had been stolen, because now we've discovered that.
But that's an interesting discovery, because all throughout, the source of the story is these two individuals allegedly making away with $1 million and some euros, as we're being told. Later on, the lawyers for Cecilia Dapaah publicly wrote to, of course, us, put it out there in the public, indicating that the amounts and the permutations were not correct. But the report indicated that some substantial amount of money was missing. Is it the case that the minister is not able to account or perhaps recollect how much was in this private residence? A reason for which they are not able to tell how much was stolen?
Definitely. In fact, some of the information we've been getting from the grapevine is that the amount of money in Cecilia Dapaah's house was so much, and some of them, in fact, when the special prosecutor's officers were searching the premises and were unearthing the money, getting the money from all sources, Madam Cecilia Dapaah, the court documents, was there and feigned surprise. That is the words the OSP used. That Madam Cecilia Dapaah was surprised that all that amount of money were in the house. She later had to put up a defense for all of them. Some of them, like we discussed yesterday, being citizen allowance, being money from a cosmetic shops. But at the time, initially, when these amounts of money in envelopes, wrapped in
according to the OSP.
According to the OSP,
so if we're drawing the dots, this would be the time. Of course, she was asked to report to the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Subsequently, that night, there was a raid on this private residence that we understand. This is where all of this is unfolding.
This is where all this is unfolding. And like you said, the special prosecutor invited Madam Cecilia Dapaah, took a statement, and the expectation was that maybe Cecilia Dapaah was going to leave. But she said the special prosecutor decided that we're going to leave together with Madam Cecilia Dapaah and go to the house and go and search the place. And that is when they unearthed a lot of cash.
Now the OSP is also making yet another attempt to say, look, this is the reason why I believe the accounts, properties, related interest that we've been looking at must be frozen. I believe that's why the OSP is doing all of this.
Yes, the OSP is cautioning this court that is going to hear this case on the 18th of October that if you go the same route as the other court did, you'll be flouting the laws. The OSP says, by combined effects of certain provisions in the OSP Act, all that is required for a court to confirm the freezing orders in question is three matters. One, the respondent in question is being investigated for corruption or corruption-related offense. Two, that a special prosecutor has in writing frozen the property in question. And then three, there are reasonable grounds to believe that a confiscation order shall be made. The special prosecutor is saying that these are all the three reasons he must satisfy. He believes he has satisfied all of them, and he believes a court properly so constituted must look at the basis of these three provisions and allow the special prosecutor to freeze these assets and seize those ones that he has seized for at least the year that is mandated in the law, so that within that year, he can now conduct the investigation and then go ahead and press charges.
But there's also another fear here, quickly, about what the status of these properties are. They are not frozen, right?
Currently, they are frozen again because the court ordered the special prosecutor to release them to Madam Cecilia Dapaah. He did. And then immediately seized the properties again and froze those bank accounts, some of which have had the dead brother of Cecilia Dapaah sending money according to the special prosecutor.
We need to be very cautious about that.
Yes. And so currently, this amount of money, the ones that were personally taken and discovered in Madam Sladape's house by the OSP has been taken into custody by the OSP. The bank accounts have all now been frozen, awaiting that 18th October hearing where the court will now be seized with the facts and will now make a decision as to whether or not this seizure and confirmation is warranted.
But in all of this, have we heard from the lawyers of Cecilia Abinadab? I asked this question yesterday. It's very crucial that we hear from them, and that's why I'm asking you today as well.
Yes, we have been trying as a media house. We've been trying all we can to try and get Madam Sladape to comment on these allegations that have been made by the special prosecutor. It's been running in the media since yesterday. Our information is that Madam Sladape and the lawyers do not want to comment publicly on this. The expectation is that very soon they will file their own affidavit in opposition to this application filed by the special prosecutor. When that is done, they can now fully appreciate the facts and then put out their own version. Definitely, we'll be on the lookout if we get a document and the special prosecutor is challenged on the basis of these facts by Cecilia Dapa and her lawyers. We'll definitely bring that to viewers.
And Kweku, you've been following quite a lot that's happening, not just about the court case, because we're also getting indication that the minority in Parliament is sounding an alarm bell on government's plan to actually collateralize Ghana's stake in the 10 oil fields to secure a loan of close to some $431.5 million just before Parliament went on recess. We know that GMPC sought approval from the Might and Energy Committee to borrow more than $600 million, but the committee asked the company to bring the terms and conditions of this loan before the House so that consideration can be done on that. The minority is now alleging that President Akufo-Addo has asked GNPC to borrow more than $400 million without approval from Parliament. Here's the minority spokesperson on Might and Energy, John Jinapo.
If we allow this government to plunder our oil resources, it will affect future generations. As if this is not enough, another document that was intercepted at the board level of the GMPC has 5 main components: the deed of indebtedness, the joint crude oil supply and purchase agreement, the prepayment facility agreement, the guarantee facility agreement, and the crude oil supply and purchase agreement. The key in this has to do with the fact that GMPC is raising this facility from Letasco and Look Oil, and in return, they are giving out our oil to this company for the next 5.5 years. Indeed, all of the oil in the 10 fields has been encumbered, including royalties, including surface rentals, and our carried and participating interest. All of it for the next 5.5 years would be escrowed to this company. More importantly, every year, a minimum of 3.8 million barrels of our crude oil would be given to Letasco for this loan that is being raised. No one even knows what exactly they want to use the money for, apart from some repayment of debt. In addition to that, they are charging an interest of SOFR plus margin. And when you look at the document, and I refer you to page 5 of the document, apart from the SOFR, the margin goes up to about 9.5% in respect of tranche B. So you pay the SOFR rate and add 9.5% on that amount. This is mind-boggling. You cannot plunder our oil resources in the way and manner in which the Akufo-Addo government is going about. This is a government that received over $1.4 billion of oil receipts last year, the highest ever. And yet, despite receiving all these huge revenues from our oil sales, you want to take $400 million today and mortgage our future for the next 5.5 years and escrow the whole of the 10 field oil. And when the 10 field oil is not even enough, in this agreement, they are committing that they can extend it to other oils.
Well, parliamentary correspondent Akufo-Addo is still here with us, and it's so good that coincidentally you're looking at this document about Cecilia Abinadapa, and now the minority in parliament is raising these concerns as well. For those who do not have the background about this deal, what's GMPC looking for from parliament? So
annually, parliament is expected to approve what is called the work plan of GMPC. That is what GMPC expects to do in the year and how much money they need to do that. Normally, it may come up with a few loan agreements so that they can get enough funds to be able to do their projects. So when GMPC brought their work plan, they had about $600 million. They wanted the Mines and Energy Committee to approve, recommend to the House for approval. Parliament at the time, through the committee, told GMPC that you need to go back and bring us the full terms and conditions that we can put that before the House. But that was just before Parliament went on recess. Now that Parliament is on break and the GMPC cannot come and put this document before them for approval, it appears GMPC has been working. And the allegation by the minority through John Jinapor is that the President of the Republic has given GMPC an approval to go ahead and borrow without parliamentary approval.
He did that while away in New York?
That is the conversation that is being had. And in fact, there are minutes.
Before. We never know.
Yes, it appears the meeting was held before the president traveled.
Okay, right.
And there are minutes that the NEC MPs are putting out. They're unable to confirm the authenticity yet.
Right, yeah.
But they claim that the president sat in a meeting together with the chief of staff, his secretary, the ministers of finance, deputy minister for energy, and agreed that this must be happening. We can listen to John Jinapor make the point that the president has unlawfully decided to ask GMPC to go ahead to borrow more. Let's listen.
The Parliamentary Select Committee on Mines and Energy, under the chairmanship of Honorable Atachia, submitted the report of the Committee on Mines and Energy on the 2023 work program of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, which is GNPC. Indeed, this is a constitutional requirement. And so we consider that in the third session of the 8th Parliament of the 4th Republic of Ghana, one of the key issues that came up for consideration was a request by GMPC to raise an amount of $620 million in a form of a loan facility from Letasco. Indeed, Parliament took a decision that it cannot approve that amount in their work program. In fact, Parliament directed, and I read, the committee recommends to GMPC to lay the terms and conditions of the intended loan for consideration of the House in accordance with Article 181 of the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, to our utmost shock, I have come across documents, and the minority side in particular have become aware that the presidency is using coercive force, the power of the presidency, to compel GMPC to proceed and execute this loan agreement without parliamentary approval. The presidency called a meeting on 14th of September at 11 a.m. GMT. The presidency directed GMPC to seek for board approval and proceed to raise a total amount of 431 million United States dollars without parliamentary approval. I therefore want to call on the GMPC chief executive and the board that if you proceed with this directive, you'll be committing an illegality. And the minority wish to serve notice that we shall use every necessary tool available to ensure that we do what is right and legal.
But now let's talk about the private sector. The Ghana Union of Traders this afternoon charging its members to resist any form of harassment and also intimidation from officers of the Ghana Revenue Authority. The union has, amongst other things, accused the Ghana Revenue Authority of intercepting their cargoes and transits from Accra to other parts of the country on allegations of under-declaration of some of their goods, a situation they say is affecting their businesses. President of the Ghana Union of Traders, Dr. Joseph Bain, has been addressing a press briefing today.
It has come to our notice with great concern about the activities of the Ghana Revenue Authority, which has formed various task forces that rampantly intercept, release cargoes after the cargoes have passed through all clearing processes and procedures at the port in the name of enforcing tax compliance, as if they don't even trust their own systems of clearance at the port. This happens more to the cargoes going to the Ashanti region. It could be recalled that a few days ago, our Ashanti region branch issued a press conference on this constant harassment and intimidation of traders in the region by GRE officers after their cargoes have passed through the due clearing processes at the port of Tema and release them to them. The GRA cannot assign any cogent reason for the harassment of the traders in the Ashanti region, apart from their usual flimsy explanation that Ashanti region contributes only about 12% to the national revenue. They also claim that they do not understand why goods in Ashanti region are cheaper than those in Greater Accra region, failing to recognize the simple fact that purchasing power and demand for goods and services in Accra are higher than any part of the country. Furthermore, the 12% tax contribution from Ashanti commensurate with the business activities in that region, as most of the corporate entities with branches in Ashanti and other regions pay their taxes in the national capital.
Unfortunately, we've been joined now by Dr. Obeng, who's joining us via Zoom. Thank you, Doc, for speaking to us. Why is it strange for GRA and customs to intercept goods? After all, we know that this is part of their routine activities. It's part of their mandate, isn't it? They're simply doing their job, ensuring that there's compliance. Why do you have a challenge with that as GUTA?
Yeah, when they are doing occasional checkups, that is acceptable. Maybe when you are operating on tip-offs. But when it becomes you do it at rampant, then it's not correct. So random checking, yes. But this is what they do by the day. And it is not acceptable, and we cannot accept it. Because, you know, the goods that we import, when we bring it at the Tema port, they are in detention. You know that when we bring goods at the Tema port, it is detained until they have scrutinized it and verify all documentation before handing us with the duties that we pay. We do not examine the goods ourselves. The goods that have been in detention at the Tema port are in the hands of well-trained professionals, customs officers who do that. And after they have been relieved and released from this detention and come out of the Tema port, then you detain it again. What sense does it make? Does it make sense to you?
Doc, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering if you've been engaging GRA on all of these concerns ever since, and
we've
the fact
been talking ever since. Our brothers and sisters in Kumasi have been crying. In fact, Kumasi businesses is collapsing. Most of them are relocating to Accra because there's no fairness in this. That one region should be targeted, and all this thing is going. Because we've contacted GRA on this issue with the Commissioner of Customs himself. We've made a program, a very big program, where all stakeholders, including all GRA officials, including BNI, including Ministry of Trade, and all Ministry of Finance and all that in Kumasi, now what they call the Lancet Hotel, that's Golden Tulip. It was a big, and we all converged in this hotel and talk about why they should harass or detain goods that have already been released by their own customs. So all that we are saying is that we do not have any problem at all for customs to do all their due diligences at the port when our goods are detained with them. They scrutinize it, and whatever amount that they want us to pay, they let us pay. But when goods leave the port of Tema, and then they come and detain us again, that is uncalled for. That is not a civilization. You wouldn't see this in any civilized country.
Okay, there are lots of people. There are lots of people.
Happen.
Yeah, there are lots of people watching us now, Doc, who may not be in the industry, the same industry you find yourself, so they are not able to picture what's happening. Give us a sense of how rampant this is. How often you have the snap checks and people stopping or intercepting your cargoes.
They do it by the day. They do it by the day, and the Kumasi people have been crying. The Kumasi people sometimes haven't paid their legitimate duty at the port. Then their own officials also intercept the goods and say that what you paid to our officers at the port is not correct. But how can they do this to us? And they make us as scapegoats and play us as puppets. This is not fair. In a free country like Ghana, we are not in a police state. How can't we do our business in freedom? Especially when you have all the opportunity to access our goods at the port. The goods sometimes are detained at the port as long as 2 weeks for you to do all your verification and all that. So when it comes out, immediately it comes out and you say that whatever has gone on in the port, inside the port is not correct. Then, of course, we have a problem. If you want to revamp the port, if you think that your own system is not working, then the blame shouldn't come to me. Then you have to revamp your port or your clearance system.
Okay. The argument is that within the window of the law, there's possibility of back taxing you. I don't know if I'm using the terminology right. Could that not be maybe that legal option that you find GRA officials taking advantage of?
No, but it means that then the wrongs that you are doing at the port is more than the rights. If you do that, then it does not put GRA in the good light that we are doing the right thing. No, you do this randomly or occasionally when you think that something has gone wrong. But if about 80%, 90%, you still have to do this, then there's something obviously wrong with your clearing system. That's what will you have to put the blame on the innocent trader? We do not examine ourselves. So in any, wherever you see it, it is not in good light, even for the image of GRA, that they should be seen, that they trust their own institution, that they should be seen, that they have efficient systems in place, that they should be seen, that we are legitimate customers of them, and that they are serving, they are giving us service, rather than putting us in the light as common criminals and all that, because we do not examine ourselves. It is not fair. So goods that have taken their time, whenever we bring goods at the port, they are in detention. And they are in the detention in the hands of customs. So it should not be said that goods that we have detained for scrutiny and all that comes out and you detain it again. We are not going to accept.
Okay, what will be the next line of action? And now that you've raised the concern, you have told us also that on the sidelines you've tried reaching out to GRA, you've engaged the commissioner, and yet the officers on the ground continue to do this. So what will be the next line of action then?
They are very much aware of this. These complaints have come, especially the customs head in Kumasi. We've engaged her so many times. She's a lady. And we have done all these things. We have meeting with commissioner. We've done all these things. And what they say normally is that the tax that comes from the region is less. If 12% is coming from Ashanti region, it commensurates with what activities there. Kumasi is only dwelling on trading. And then the goods that they bring in Kumasi, their custom charges at the port does not discriminate. So when they clear container for Kumasi people, it has not got different value. Does it? You clear it and it's the same values that you give to the people of Accra, Tema, and elsewhere. So how can you say that Kumasi people are the one to blame and all that? There's nothing to understand about this. And so we are not saying that they do not do some of these checks. But when it becomes so rampant, then of course, it's indictment on their own activity at the port. It's indictment the fact that there's inefficient efficiency in the port. But I don't think that they are indicting their own system. So if the system is not correct for you, and what is going wrong? What is wrong? Who is doing the wrong?
Dr. Alvin,
is it the captains that is doing their work at the port, or is it the trader who is clearing his goods? Who made the wrong? Let's find that and then put this thing in proper perspective. We do not have any problem that our goods are scrutinized to the core, and then let us pay whatever amount that we want us to pay. It's better.
Yeah, I was about asking you that question. That, I mean, it's as though you're holding, the brief for simply your members, believing their side of the story, and completely neglecting what it is that the Ghana Revenue Authority may also have to say about the entire process.
So all the clearance of goods that is meant for Kumasi are not well documented, or what?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you're simply believing, entirely believing the story of your members.
Let's put it in this perspective.
Okay.
That is there discrimination at the port in the first place? That when they clear goods, the values they give to the people in the Ashanti region and beyond. Don't think that it's only for the Kumasi people, because some of them transport their goods through that corridor to Tsunami, to Tamale, and all these places, and they are all suffering this fate. It is not fair. And this is something that we've talked about it all this time. So if they tell us, then whatever goods from Kumasi come, they should subject it to scrutiny at the port. And they do whatever they want to do, and when they clear it, they don't have to offload the goods, where they will suffer breakages. Where some of the goods are perishable, they have to suffer the time. Because trade facilitation is time, ease, and cost of doing business. So when you impede in any of this, you are disturbing the growth of business in that region. And so that aside, we also talk about the VAT invigilation, where officials have been going to a member shop and all that. We've always said that the structure of the VAT is not correct. It's not uniform, and it doesn't exist anywhere in the world, where we have a VAT system that is in three forms: that of the flat rate, that of the standard rate, and those who are not captured to pay the VAT itself. All of us compounded in one space of trading. And how fair is it? And there's no compulsion on the part, because don't forget that it's a consumption tax. It's not for the people to pay. All the people in Kumasi, all the people in Accra, Mankasim, Tamale, all the traders in the informal space are using their own fiscal money to go and pay VAT because they don't want to be harassed. The consumer is not even ready to accept the VAT charges, because of these disparities that I'm talking about. Because in the market, DRA have also legitimized those people who do not have to collect the VAT. And the consumer has option to buy from wherever he wants. And then the consumer uses the discretion to buy from where the VAT is not being charged. So are you saying that you are punishing those people who are made to register for VAT? Is that what they are trying to say? That's why we are saying that we are not going to allow ourselves to be victimized against by officialdom unless they have been able to restructure the VAT system to ensure conformity, to ensure uniformity, to ensure that it brings compliance. If they do not do that, then those people who have registered into the VAT are necessarily being punished and being taken as scapegoats.
All right. So
let's make the structure well, bring fairness, because we are all trading and we are in the same space. And then one is charging 22% VAT, another is charging 4% VAT, and yet another is not charging at all. And it's all legal in the same space. Does it happen in UK? When you go to Dubai, if it is 5%, it's across the board, and everybody is charging, and it's also compulsory for the consumer. This is a consumption tax, and there's no policy to that bring compulsion on the part of the consuming public to receive VAT invoice. What system is this? And then you go and punish people unnecessarily. And this is what we say we are not going to allow and accept that. We won't do that.
Okay.
And we have told our members to resist. And that if it persists, then of course we know what to do. We have our members. It's not that we don't want to pay taxes, but we want to pay tax where it is fair.
Okay.
We want to pay tax that will ensure that government has its worth. We want to pay tax where our businesses are not collapsed, because taxes are not structured to destroy businesses. That's not how taxes are structured. So the VAT should be restructured, made simplified, made uniform, and then made affordable, so that compliance will be so high. When we say that tax to GDP in the sub-region, ours is the lowest, it is true, because the other regions, their tax levels are low, and so compliance is high. Ours, we are being surprised with high taxes, and so it does not ensure compliance. The key to having revenue, to achieve your revenue target, is compliance. They are never thinking about compliance. All that they are thinking is to lump up taxes upon taxes on the same few people who otherwise have been captured, or who could have even grown, because they have captured them into the system. And the same people who they put these taxes and who they intimidate, embarrass, and then suppress them and suppress their growth. How are you going to help us achieve a tax to GDP of 80 when you are suppressing this?
I can imagine the frustration from the business community. Dr. Obeng, grateful for your time. We'll definitely get through to the Ghana Revenue Authority and to get their response as well. We've tried that, not successful as of now, but we'll bring you reactions in our subsequent bulletins. But for now, we need to stay on the economy as well, because Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta in the 2023 mid-year budget review slashed Ghana's GDP growth by some from 2.8% to 1.5%, signaling that the economy was expected to grow, but not as initially projected. So this afternoon, the just released GDP figures by the Ghana Statistical Service is indicating to us that there's a decline actually in growth of the Ghanaian economy, with the industry sector recording some negative growth. Again, construction, electricity and manufacturing are all contracted, of course, and we know the government statistician, Professor Samuel Kwabena has been speaking to the press about it, indicating that for the first quarter, growth rate from the earlier 4.2% declined to 3.3%. Listen.
In the second quarter of 2023, from both an oil perspective and a non-oil perspective, the economy grew by 3.2%. From an oil perspective, the 3.2% that we've recorded for the second quarter of 2023 indicates a 0.1 slowdown relative to what we recorded in the first quarter of 2023. In the first quarter of 2023, the economy grew by 3.3%, and in the last quarter of 2022, the economy grew by 3.7%. Over these 3 quarters, the 3.2 indicates the lowest growth rate, as the economy grew by 3.7 in the last quarter of 2022 and 3.3 in the first quarter of 2023. From a non-oil perspective, the 3.2 growth rate that has been recorded for the second quarter of 2023 indicates a slowdown relative to the last 2 quarters. As from a non-oil perspective, in the last quarter of 2022, the economy grew by 4.3%, increased marginally to 4.4% in the first quarter of 2023, and a dip of 1.2 percentage points to 3.2 growth rate non-oil perspective for the second quarter of 2023. Growth rate across the different sectors: the agricultural sector for the second quarter of 2023 grew by 6.0%, and also the services sector grew by 6.3% for the second quarter of 2023. While we saw a growth rate for agricultural and services sector, respectively 6.0 and 6.3% for the second quarter of 2023, the industry sector contracted by 1.9% for the second quarter of 2023. These growth rates relative to the average for the period 2014 quarter one to second quarter 2023, we see increases for the second quarter of 2023 for agricultural and services sectors, while we see a slowdown or a contraction for the industry sector as it contracted by 1.9% relative to an average of 3.9% for the industry sector for the period first quarter 2014 to second quarter 2023.
Let's look at the implication now as we further break down the figures released by the Statistical Service. Joining us now is data analyst Isaac of VHA with the Joy News team. Isaac, fresh figures, but yeah, we're getting bits and bits of info as the hours go by. But the headliner is that we're not growing as we should. What for you, and that should be your personal assessment of the factors, is accounting for why we're here today?
In the mid-year budget review, made a tall list of revisions, not just the GDP, but we revised up our inflation target. Also, our import cover, everything was revised downwards. So the finance minister, in fact, revised our GDP growth rate for 2023 from that 2.8 that was actually projected in November 2022 to 1.5%. This was in line with the IMF target of 1.5 by the end of 2023. But we are hoping that starting from 2024, 2025, 2026, when the IMF program is finally over, we should see growth rates revamping. But what we see currently is a slight dip, about 0.1%, but in economic terms is very significant. In the second quarter GDP. So it simply means that you are comparing the GDP in the second quarter of this year to the GDP in the second quarter of 2022. And if you do that, that will be comparing 3.5 in 2022 to now 3.2 in 2023. And so there's some sort of slight decline in the economy, slowing down.
But even if you go a step back, as we're seeing on the screens right now, quarter 2 2021 was way higher.
Yeah, it was higher.
4.5, correct?
So you are looking at the non-oil. I think
yes.
If you look at the blue. Okay.
Yes.
The red
4.5. Yes.
Yeah, 4.4. Right.
Yes. No, it's 5.
4.5. I think it was relatively high.
Yeah.
That's why we say that the economy is currently on a certain sort of a slowdown, but it's as expected because the overall GDP for the entire year has been revised to 1.5, and so you should expect some of this, sector by sector, declines. But let me go through the sector by sector analysis because it's important.
Very important.
Putting focus on probably the industry sector. So let's start with the agri sector.
Yes.
It grew by 1.3% in the second quarter of 2023. Under the agri sector, there were three, subsectors that recorded, expansions. We have fishing, 2.8%, livestock, 1.4%, crops and cocoa, 1.3%. But there's one subsector that recorded a decline or a contraction, which is forestry and logging. And we all know the problem going on with illegal mining. Recorded a contraction of a significant 1.1% in the second quarter of 2023. Industry sector is still recording negative growth. It's still shrinking. Recorded a shrinking of 0.8% in the second quarter of 2023. It was only mining and quarry that recorded 0.8 expansion. But if you look at the subsectors,
and what's more worrying, just before we get to that aspect or space, you can tell clearly that it's also having an effect on imports and exports.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because just look at the chart on the screen right now. Is the services sector that's currently driving the
economy, which is dangerous.
Which first used to be agri, and even industry, which is supposed to probably employ majority of the workforce
and to produce more locally,
production, and then also help to bring down inflation. Is currently contracting, or is currently shrinking. That is why you have Guta and Co. all saying that the taxes and some other things that probably are affecting. GSS just released PPI and it's still very high. CPI is also high. Inflation and other things are still very high. Depreciation of the CD. But it's important to note that if you look at the construction sector, subsector, for instance, it's shrunk by 3.1%, very significant. Electricity by 1.2%, manufacturing 0.1%, and water supply, management and remediation activities by 0.8%. Now, services sector recorded some massive, growth by 2.6% in the second quarter of 2020. But blessed, the government statistician also revised, the first quarter GDP figure was, I think, around 4.2%.
Yes, 4.2.
It has been revised from that 4.2 to now 3.3.
Yes.
And the government statistician explained why they have to do this revision. It was because in the first quarter, the provisional data that they had, they pegged, the services sector growth rate at around, I think, 10%. But now, upon revisions, they are looking at somewhere around 6%. Yeah. And so there is a need to revise that 4.2% to 3.1%.
Okay, you know what? The viewer out there is asking the question, so what's the outlook for me? My personal economy. I mean, that's what matters.
Well, I said it, I am not surprised because we are still going to do probably a third round of a DDEP. And all of these is supposed to, we measure GDP by production. Yeah. I mean, if you are measuring GDP by production, and the subsectors in your economy are being battered with DDEP, debt restructuring, and a whole lot of things like other things like inflation, then you certainly don't expect your economy. So I agree with the IMF when they say the economy will grow at 1.5. The finance ministry or government said we're going
fighting
to
that
2.8. They realized that this was not going to be realistic. But let's look at this. If you're able to record an additional, maybe a figure about 3% in the third quarter, then probably we may probably grow more than 1.5 at the end of the year. But as it stands now, there's some sort of slight decline or, in terms of our economic expansion. But things are looking good, especially in the services sector. Yeah. But in the industry sector, it's not looking good at all.
I like to keep the balance because we're positive if industries are active. Yeah, that's the bane of every developing economy when you don't have your industries functioning well. We've heard from, for instance, the AGI point out on countless occasions that what's happening to the Ghanaian economy, they are bearing the brunt the more because everything seems to affect them the more.
Yeah, because I mean, if you just like Joseph Obin was saying, now if you go to the port, you are subject to a whole lot of, scrutiny. Not just that, but your import duty has also been increased. Apart from that, you also have this depreciation that you have to deal with. Your capital that you are working with, just because of depreciation, you may have lost significant amount of it. When you bring the goods into the economy, people are not able to purchase because inflation is also high. Their purchasing power. So the Ghanaian economy is in some sort of crisis, but I hope that, and I believe that, we'll come out of it. If you look at this IMF program and probably the PCPEC program, if you're able to, implement some of the policies that we say we're going to do and cut down on cost and wastage and do debt restructuring properly.
I mean, that's all we can hope for. Yeah. We can just hope that things will get better some way, somehow. If it's by magic or...
But I mean, Nigeria is beating us in terms of inflation. I mean, I think they are around 24% or so. We are still hovering around 40%. Yeah. And I mean, we are in this together. We were all affected.
Together, you say?
Well, some people were allowed to.
Interesting. Anyway, Isaac Ovieje, let me spare you, of course, the trouble. Thank you for updating us on this latest figures we're receiving from the Ghana Statistical Service. You're watching The Pulse here on the Joy News channel. When we get back, we have some more stories for you. And you're welcome back. Former Police Commissioner George Alexander Mensah is warming up to delegates of the New Patriotic Party in his bid to represent the Bekwai constituency in the upcoming parliamentary elections. His road safety campaign in the area has soared his popularity amongst constituents. At least 5 people have declared their intention to contest in the New Patriotic Party's parliamentary primaries as the incumbent Joseph Osei prepares to take a bow. Nana Aljima has been visiting the constituency after George and Lex Mensah declared his intentions and filed this report.
The first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Joseph Osei, is expected to exit Parliament after serving the Bekwai constituency since 2009. This decision has since emboldened about 5 people to put themselves up for the upcoming parliamentary primary in Bekwai. COP George Alex Mensah, who recently appeared before the parliamentary committee over an alleged plot to oust the Inspector General of Police, answered questions bordering his political affiliation.
You have been an MPP member long time before you joined the service, is that correct? Mr. Chairman, my family has been with the UP tradition ever since I was born, and it remained there till now.
Upon his retirement from the police service last week, his interest in becoming the MP was confirmed. Anrian Kwanta is the biggest transit point in the Bekwai constituency. To the people here, Alex Mensah is known as the police officer who has shown interest in road safety campaigns. Stickers of the campaign are widespread.
He has helped educate all the drivers here. In the local language, he breaks down all the traffic regulations.
Station master at Anrian Kwanta, Kwejo Boatin Papalupa, speaks of Alex Mensah's popularity among the people.
Because baby, I will say,
we are hoping that the COP comes and continue what the present MP is doing. We need people of such caliber to come and help develop Bekwai. If the COP becomes MP, the recent MP can also climb up the political ladder to help us.
Na one will be MP no say ususu timi boa kosoro no su konya ba ko kan ho yes enya mienu ebema Bekwai yempuntuo no akonani ma dia aboa yen.
Joy News sources reveal a campaign team of the aspirant has already started engaging party delegates.
Enti wono no ba na ye be hia enti campaign dia na ya dwene se
he has met us. We decided to keep the campaign very low due to the flag bearership race. Immediately nominations are opened, the campaign will be enhanced.
It is believed that some party bigwigs are galvanizing support for the campaign. For Joy News, Nana Aljima reporting.
And now between 20 and 30% of tobacco products on Ghana's markets are all from the areas which we know to be presenting some challenges to industry players. Now, this was actually reviewed by the head of Tobacco and Substance Abuse Directorate at the Food and Drugs Authority, Dr. Olivia Akufo-Addo. She actually made the revelations at the opening of a 3-day stakeholder engagement on illicit tobacco flow this morning. The following report for you.
The 3-day workshop has been attended by stakeholders from the Ministry of Health, World Health Organization, Ghana Immigration Service, civil society organizations, among others, and is aimed at fashioning out modalities towards implementing the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in Ghana. Speaking to the media on the sidelines, head of Tobacco and Substances of Abuse Directorate at the Food and Drugs Authority, FDA, Dr. Olivia Akufo-Addo, bemoaned the growing spate of illicit tobacco trade and the need to combat it.
The baseline studies that academia have done so far says that is about 20 to 30% in country, and this is practically a global problem. It's not peculiar to only Ghana. So what the illicit ones should have are graphic health warnings that are allowable or have been designated by Food and Drugs Authority. It should have minimum age restriction, that is 18. It should be labeled clearly in only English. But we realize that those that normally are illicit wouldn't have gone through regulation. They won't have the graphic health warnings. They wouldn't have undergone laboratory investigations. Some even have labeling in French. And what this does is they are competitively cheaper, and youth are able to get these products, and it would, all the gains we've done so far in tobacco, if we do not concentrate on getting rid of illicit, all the gains will come to zero.
The World Health Organization's Coordinator for Development Assistance, Andrew Black, believes the full implementation of the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control will, among other things, help shore up government revenue.
If we were to eliminate all of the illicit tobacco in Ghana, that would have extremely high benefits for tax revenues. Will bring more money into the government's revenues that can be spent by the government for the benefit of the people of Ghana.
On his part, the Executive Director of Programs at the Vision for Alternative Development, Lavrant Musa, believes without enhanced awareness and stringent measures in place, implementation of the WHO's protocols on illicit tobacco trade could be counterproductive.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't want to be the prophet of doom, but I don't see much progress unless we are able to put systems in place to ensure we're able to control our borders very well. Because currently, if you speak to many of the border control points, they are either not aware of some of the distinctive features of the tobacco products, which also means that we need to do more awareness creation, train the custom officials, the GRA officials, so that they are able to detect these products. I know the GRA have apps that you can use to detect illicit products, but the point is that there are a lot of illicit products around our borders. So if we are able to consciously put mechanisms in place, ensure that we are able to man our border, put officials there, train them, then we will see some headway.
A participant from the Ghana Immigration Service, however, believes the 3-day stakeholder deliberations will help curb the menace.
Our borders are considered very porous, so we also conduct a lot of patrols along these points. I believe that Joy News recently you covered our story where we see about 64,000 slabs of marijuana in Nive. Well, this workshop is very helpful to the Ghana Immigration Service because it gives us the knowledge. It also in the space, so FDA, customs, special prosecutor, and the Ghana Police Service and all other agencies that work within the space.
A 2020 report pegged Ghana's tobacco consumption at 4.8 and 0.3% among male adult and women respectively. This puts prevalence of tobacco smoking at 2.6% at the national level. Carlos Scaloni's report for Joy News.
Now, Chief Executive Officer of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Akufo-Addo, has expressed some deep concerns about the rising incidences of burn cases in the country. He noted that a significant portion of these recorded domestic burn cases primarily involve children. Dr. Amposa emphasized the importance of parents exercising some level of caution regarding their children's proximity to open flames and underscored the critical need for prioritizing fire safety measures. There's more in the following report.
A burn is an injury to the skin and other organic tissue primarily caused by heat or due to radiation, radioactivity, friction, or contact with chemicals. In Ghana, the number of burn cases recorded continue to increase, especially among children. The Chief Executive Officer of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Opoku-Areampoma, speaking at the opening ceremony of a workshop organized by the International Network for Training, Education and Research in Burns on advanced burn care rehabilitation, described the situation as worrying.
In fact, the number of burn cases in Ghana is still quite worrying, and it's happening mostly at the domestic level, and we are seeing it from hot water for the children, the pediatric population, we see a lot of burns from hot soup. Like during the rainy season in the morning, people want to prepare hot water to go and bath, and the way it is handled. So most of the accidents with hot water occurs in the kitchen and the bathroom most of the time. And then for the older population, we are seeing a number of burn cases, or significant number of burn cases from the use of gas. Many people don't understand how to use gas properly, even where the gas is located, because it's not supposed to be in an enclosed space. And so and then sometimes when the gas is leaking, instead of changing the regulator, they will rather put a stone on it or try and do some adjustments on their own. Some of the cylinders are expired, the valves are not working well. So these are all some of the challenges.
He also cautioned parents to be mindful of their children around fire and other harmful substances, and also advocated the promotion of fire safety among Ghanaians as a way of checking the increasing cases.
Lives. And sometimes general safety with fires, both in the workplace and other, we as a society, we need to be very conscious of the fact that fire is an existing potential hazard that can occur at any time, so that we are very careful, make sure that we prevent fires as much as possible. And then when the fires do happen, for instance, we must know what first aid we should give. Most of the time, before people get to hospital, they've applied all sorts of concoctions and ointments to it, which actually make this condition worse.
The workshop is aimed at delivering advanced burn care rehabilitation training and building leadership through training future trainers, alongside building confidence and skills to provide the best therapy possible despite limited resources. Alberta Roxon is the Deputy Chief Physiotherapist at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital and the lead for the Interburns rehabilitation.
What we seek to achieve at Interburns with this 5-day-long training is to be able to improve upon burn care in as many low-middle-income countries as possible. At this training, we have about 13 countries being represented, and we have participants from United Arab Emirates as well. We hope to be able to improve upon their hands-on skills in managing of burn patients to improve health outcomes with the patient groups that they have to handle.
The 5-day workshop brought together therapists working in low-resource settings from across Africa to equip them with the necessary skills to give effective treatment and rehabilitation to burn patients. Prince Kwame Kudugas reports, read to you.
Well, let's look at some of the developments elsewhere across the world as European leaders are discussing measures to deal with the high number of arrivals of refugees. The Italian island, as we know it, has become an epicenter with a sharp rise in the arrivals by boat. Now, more than 7,000 landed recently at the island's permanent population. Our European Commission President von der Leyen has visited the island and promised a plan to deal with the situation. The arrivals are generating political pressure across the European Union. Joining us now is Thomas Sparrow, who has more on this for us. Thomas, what does the 10-point plan include? Share the details with us.
Short term, the plan includes in particular help towards Italian authorities and authorities in the island of Lampedusa to help those who have already arrived. In other words, to register them, to then refer them to the specific authorities that will continue to deal with them as they move to other parts of Italy and to other parts of Europe. So that's the sort of urgent element in the plan. If you look at medium to maybe long-term proposals in that 10-point plan presented by EU Commission leader Ursula von der Leyen, you can see in particular the issue of Frontex. Frontex is the external border agency of the European Union, and the plans include stepping up efforts by Frontex to fight people smugglers. Another important element is working closer with countries of origin and transit in Northern Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa as well. Some of the countries involved there, some of the countries mentioned in that 10-point plan include Tunisia, which is a very important country of transit, but also other countries of origin, including Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal and Guinea.
realistic, the plan is, and how other countries such as Germany reacting?
It's an important question whether this plan is realistic, because we've seen in the past that European leaders and European countries do not necessarily see eye to eye when it comes to migration. So bringing these plans to fruition, making them realistic, is definitely the next challenge for European authorities. Also for authorities in several of the countries that are most affected. Germany is one of the countries that is most affected by the arrival of refugees, because many of those who arrive, for example, in Lampedusa, want to actually move further north. They want to go to other countries like Germany. So Germany has certainly seen an increase in the arrival of asylum seekers compared to 2022. And this has meant that also here in Germany there has been a very big debate as to what authorities should do to help those in need, but also to help local, regional and national authorities that are trying, obviously, to deal with this situation. One of the issues that is being discussed is a possible upper limit for the number of refugees, an issue that was also debated, by the way, in 2015 and 2016 during the so-called refugee crisis. But this is an issue that, for now, the German government is not planning to introduce.
Okay, grateful, and thanks for joining us with the latest, and all the best from Berlin. That's all we have for you in this package of The Pulse. I'm Blessed. Log on to myjoyonline.com. We have updates for you. Next is Let's Talk Showbiz.